Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host Tom D'Ambra. As always, we are very thankful you take the time from your busy day to watch our program. Folks, today we have a very special guest in the studio with us, and I'm very appreciative, Ed, that on such a short notice you were able to get up here from a long drive. But we have our guest today, and his name is Ed Cutler. And Ed is the president of Gun Owners of Vermont. And for those of you who view this program outside of the state of Vermont, as in all states, the state of Vermont, the legislators, without following a lot of the open meeting laws that are incorporated here in Vermont, they sort of covertly have tried to put in this bill called S55. Ed, first I want to welcome you, and I thank you very much for coming up. Ed, if we could, give our audience just a broad perspective with some particulars about what is S55.
Well, S55 actually started out as a fairly good bill. The state of Vermont has been holding firearms for the past 30 years, and we got a bill in that would make the state sell those surplus weapons off. They're either old guns the state has, they're confiscated guns, everything, to a point where they don't have any room to put them anyplace. Mm-hmm. It went down to the Senate floor where Philip Baruth added an amendment, or a couple of amendments. One of the amendments was a universal background check. The other amendment was you couldn't buy purchase a firearm until you were 21 years old. There's some serious problems with them. Number one, Vermont has been giving kids and having kids shootings for the last 227 years. There's never been a real restriction on that. The universal background checks, again, Vermont has been handing down firearms to their kids, their families, giving them as gifts as friends.
Absolutely.
And both of those passed, and now be illegal to me to give you a gun, even if I've known you for 30 years and know you're a good guy.
Mm-hmm. And what does this say also now about our young people? They're old enough to get drafted.
Yeah.
They're old enough to go to war, but they're not old enough to come home and have a rifle or a gun.
Sure. A big problem with that, a young couple. I mean, you know, we've had rabid animals up here.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
We've had bears chase people up trees.
Absolutely.
If you're a young couple under 21, you can go buy a firearm to defend yourself against man or animal. And again, people in Vermont have always had guns. We've probably got the highest firearms ownership rate in the country.
Right, per capita, I think.
Yeah.
I think Vermont does.
Well, we've sold, since Gun Control Act, since the Brady took effect, 500,000 firearms have been sold in this state alone. Mm-hmm. Who knows about the millions before Brady?
Right, and that's really interesting when you think about Vermont has a population of what, 645,000 right now.
Yeah, it's a little less than that. I think
it's come down from the 660 when I moved here. People are leaving for because of job opportunities, and when I got here, my property taxes were $200, $300 a year, and now they're $5,000. Yeah, and it has a lot to do. All of it has to do with the school taxes, the extortion fees we got to pay to these schools, these secular schools. So, Ed, if we could, let's stay with a little bit about, particularly with this S55. So, give it a little bit of the process in Vermont, if you would explain to the audience what is open meeting laws. What is that?
Open meeting laws, you have a right to be at any meeting, town meeting, state meeting, committee hearings, things like that. Yeah. What's happened is, over the years, the State House itself has turned into you have to get on your hands and knees and beg a committee chair to speak. They're the only ones that allow you to speak, and you're subject to their rules. This is a gross violation of the open meeting law. They refused to hold public meetings, and Vermont in the old days was, we had town meetings, we still do.
Mm-hmm. And that was interesting because at the town meeting, there wasn't no mention of, Senate Bill 55, or, this is what was portrayed in it.
Sure.
You know. Now, Ed, you're speaking from expertise and experience because you're at the State House quite a bit, aren't you?
Oh, too much.
Right, right. So this isn't just hearsay. You're seeing this yourself.
Sure. It's, like I said, the state officials have always been invited to committee meetings. Some groups who hold sway with some committee chairs, specifically Maxine Grad of the House Judiciary Committee, pretty much rules that place like a dictator. I've said this before and I've gotten in trouble for it, but I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, if she has to do things like that, I think there's something seriously wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
And when they're trying to do things covertly, there is something wrong.
Oh,
because they know if it was open to the public, they would never get it passed. You know, and like Emmanuel said, Rahm Emanuel said that, you know, never let a good crisis go to waste. Well, who's to say that they're not manufacturing some of these crises? See, of course, the whole thing that brought this up is these horrific school shootings. Well, we didn't have school shootings when people were taking guns to school, whether they were hunting or going through, you know, machine tool shop or gunsmithing schools. Public schools, you know, used to teach. People have a hard time believing this. In New York City, up until, you know, 1968, they were teaching gunsmithing. They literally were. They were also teaching morality, weren't they?
Yeah.
And now we're nothing but, our school systems have gone into a secular teaching. But not only that, I mean, look, the end result is these kids can't even count change back to you at the register.
Yeah.
They're indoctrination centers now, not education centers.
I'm pretty much in agreement with that. When I was a kid, we used to bring our guns to school. We'd hunt on the way home.
Yeah.
Bring them on the school bus, put them in our lockers, whatever.
Yeah.
I had one teacher. I've always been in like the antique guns and stuff. And I had one teacher that was for lack of a better word, a father to me about things like that. He taught me in machine shop the proper way to restore the antiques, which is what I do now. From what I read now, you walk in there, if you chew up a cupcake or something and make it look like a gun, you get kicked out of school.
Sure. Kids have gotten kicked out of school for making the motion
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
You know.
It's a 180, and it's ridiculous because
It is.
we've never had a real school shooting in the state of Vermont.
Right. And up until the Columbine, we didn't have school shootings at all.
Oh, there were a few before
know?
then, believe it
Well,
or
yeah,
not.
but I'm talking not to the point of what's going on now, where you know it's these kids are almost in a sick way, almost glorified by it. You know, do you know what I mean? And of course, my big point with this, Ed, is the psychotropic drugs. A big common denominator, besides the lack of morality with these kids, besides the disintegration of the family structure in our country, besides, you know, God's morality being taken out of our schools, the psychotropic drugs are playing a part with this. And do you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with 100%. Just read the label. You could become violent. You could be suicidal. I know one person that was on it, not a kid, but an adult, that from day to day would be night and day. It's unbelievable what they do with these things. And why are they doing them? Because the kids that are slightly rowdy, or which we used to be when we were kids,
Right.
have to be controlled according to them, and the only way to do that is to drug them.
Is to drug them.
There's
Sure.
something wrong with that.
There is something wrong with that. You know, and the psychotropic drugs, but you got the fluoride in the water. Most people don't realize that fluoride is a toxin. I've been involved in EMS and fire departments for decades, and I have a hazmat book. And I can tell you right now, if a gallon of fluoride dropped on that floor, we'd have to call 911, and this be a hazmat area. Yeah. So if you read the back of the tubes of fluoridated toothpaste, it'll say, do not swallow this product, and if you do, contact poison control, and here's the number.
Yep.
The first person to use fluoride, Ed, was Stalin in the gulags. And then he saw the results, Hitler saw the results of it, and Hitler started using it in, we call them the concentration camps, they called them the labor camps. Now, my father-in-law was in Dachau as a child. And I've listened to him personally speak of his experiences there. And I will tell you, Hitler wasn't concerned about the dental health of the people that were at, Dachau or Auschwitz or any of them. but he saw the results, how it affected it made the people docile, and now from studies that the AMA and other agencies and government and non-government put out, we know that it lowers IQs. So there's another, this is like just a constant systemic way of not only dumbing down the kids, but making them aggressive to some ways, in other ways making them docile, but the psychotropic drugs are really bringing out, like you said, the suicide rates and the aggression rates. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I've done a lot of reading on it, and I've listened to a lot of people speak on it, and some of the stories from parents are just terrific.
Oh yeah. Actually, Gun Owners Vermont right now is very involved in an anti-suicide program, the Vermont Gun Shop Project. That's one of the things we can do to help. We've distributed posters, we hand out literature, and we've gone farther. We do what we call a gatekeeper program, and a lot of our members are getting involved with that, where you can actually sit and talk with somebody in a proper way to get them help. The beautiful thing about it is like, you hear a lot of times now about, people that are a danger to themselves or others. That's part of what this bill is all about.
Sure, just another way, just another way that they're judge and jury on scene, and we dub you a danger to society or yourself, and guess what? Bye-bye. They're doing that, the VA is doing that with veterans.
Oh yeah.
And I've said this years ago on this program, I read it verbatim from the VA's own documents, and I said it then, if you're a veteran associated with the VA, do not go in there and tell them you're depressed.
Yep.
And they ask you all the time, are you experiencing any depression? As soon as you say yes, guess what? You are on a list for your guns to be taken, and it's happened.
It was 170,000 people, I think, that got affected by that through the VA.
Through the VA.
Yeah.
And think of it, these are veterans who went to war, or at least served their country to whatever capacity, in the ideals of where we're supposed to be, but we're not there, are we?
No, we're not. And problem with that, some of the things, danger to yourself, okay? Now, the way the bill reads, if you're adjudicated a danger to yourself, you can't have your firearms. Some of the things that are a danger to yourself, and this is why we are against bills like this. A diabetic that refuses to take insulin can be brought to court and say they're a danger and have that insulin forced to them. They lose their firearms rights. A person that's anorexic can be force-fed after they go to court and they lose their firearms rights. These are not violent people. These are just people that for some reason decide to do things like that. That's a big problem. They're classifying everybody into one category.
Right. And the other thing is that, and we see this from their history, what they do. This is just a stepping stone, isn't it?
Oh, sure. Well, I'm still looking back at the old days. They used to sterilize Native Americans in Vermont because they considered them inferior. Right. It's still legal in this state. They just put a bill out to make that illegal this year.
Isn't that? I was not aware of that.
Well, Vermont was the last state to do this.
Yeah.
And you think of Vermont as, something where people have their freedom. They were, as long as you deem them, proper type people.
Right.
So.
See, and we have responsibilities as citizens, and there's one thing that I'm a history buff, even growing up, and I admired, Ethan Allen, for example.
Oh, he's my hero.
Right. Well, I mean, what he went through, and all of it. I mean, he was a POW. I mean, he was a prisoner. I mean, all the rest of it. But one of my heroes in the founding era was Dr. Joseph Warren. He died at Bunker Hill, unfortunately. But I want to read it. He's talking here about what our responsibility is as citizens, but also what's at stake. And if I could, and I'd like to hear what your thoughts on this is. Again, this is Dr. Joseph Warren, and he says, "Our country is in danger, but not to be despaired of. On you depend the fortunes of America. You are to decide the important questions upon which rest the happiness and the liberty of millions yet unborn. act worthy of yourselves. What do you think of that statement?
I think it's a great statement. I completely agree with it. I've always said, you know, like when they try to pass bills like this, they're looking at the moment. Mm-hmm. They forget about 50 or 100 years down the road, mm-hmm. and what happens then. We have a Constitution that we should always abide by as written.
We have two of them, don't we?
Yeah.
When you really think about it.
The United States Constitution.
The federal and the state.
our state Constitution.
Exactly. And you know, when you read the Vermont Constitution, I mean, to me, in the federal Constitution, the Second Amendment is plain enough about our rights.
Yep.
But what most people don't understand is that we don't get our rights from that document. That documents are telling the authorities, the government, what they're not allowed to intervene in and what they can't touch and what they can.
Yep.
And we get our rights. Our rights are, you know, I know everyone says unalienable, but it's the word is unalienable, and and people go, oh, that makes more sense. But anyway, we have rights to defend ourselves, our family, our property. But if we have rights, they can't be altered, taken away. Benefits can be altered or taken away. And that's how the people in government look at our rights, don't they?
Unfortunately not. The people in government right now are always saying, well, it's only a small violation of the Constitution. There is no such thing as a small violation. The Constitution, the Bill of Rights, both federal and state, are absolute highest part of law in existence.
I agree. I agree.
And regardless, you know, I can make a law to do this. No, you can't.
Right.
There's a way to do it. If you want to amend the Constitution, go
mm-hmm.
for it.
Right, and you can't do it covertly like you're trying to get
No.
this through either. And the other thing is the Vermont Constitution, the language is more direct to the individual, isn't it, with regards to gun ownership?
Oh yeah, it's very simple, and there's no militia clause or anything else. Basically, it just says that you have a right to defend yourself and the state. There's so much. We also have the Article 1, which is our opening, where it says we have the right of protecting and defending our property. So there's a number of things. It's unbelievable what they're doing, and it's not even a small incremental thing anymore. This 18 to 20-year-old, 21-year-old thing is a direct violation of a person who's of age.
Now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the other night, when we were up at the Barry Opera House the other night, which I thought was a fantastic event, and I applaud the 4 representatives that were there. You know,
sure.
Their own time, their opening statements from all 4 of them was, "Hey, listen, we want to hear from you people. We want to hear from the public on this," because they didn't say this, but we haven't been able to hear from the public yet on this because everything's been done covertly. But Illinois passed 4615, which HR 4615 in their House, which says, you got to be 21 years old to get a gun. But in Illinois, from 18 to 20, you could get a gun now. They're giving everybody 90 days to turn them in.
Yep.
That's unbelievable.
Well, yeah, it smacks of Illinois, it smacks of New York, and it smacks of California.
California, sure.
California, they actually have firearms police. It's a special unit that goes around. If you die and your spouse doesn't have the proper paperwork for that firearm, and she doesn't because it's in your name, they come to get it.
Sure.
You can't even pass it down to your wife, your kids, or anything else.
Right. Never mind the death tax that we're going to take just about everything you worked and labored for. Now we're going to come and get your guns too.
Sure, absolutely.
So, yeah.
And it's like, it gets ridiculous. And they can always classify anything as a dangerous thing.
Ed, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You're in touch, obviously, up at the State House a lot. When you spoke the other day, I got the sense that, wow, this guy's there a lot. Everybody recognized you. You're a familiar face at the State House.
Well, I'm infamous.
Right, infamous. There you go. I like that. And you're also in touch with a lot of people throughout probably the state of Vermont and outside the state, I would think.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask you two things. What is the mindset of the people holding office in the State House first? What is the mindset, generally speaking? Is there a divide line between Republican and Democrat? Or no? There you go. Go ahead. Yeah.
Actually, in the Senate, all the Republicans stood with us on the bill. We also had 4 good Democrats that stood with us. The vote was 17-13. And these Democrats we can always be relied on. In Vermont, I think people run more looking at what their logistics are in that particular area. If it's a supposedly liberal state, they'll run as a Democrat. And as funny as it sounds, people in this state are beginning to wake up. But
I think we're seeing that nationally and internationally.
Absolutely. But the funny thing is, in Vermont, you can't tell a player without the scorecard. You know, there are Democrats that are actually more conservative than some Republicans.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Interesting. And so that divide paradigm does, in some ways, is working, but in other ways, there are some good apples in the baskets.
Yeah.
That's a tight vote, 17-13.
Sure.
You know, that's not much to sway. Now, what about, Ed, organizations outside the state of Vermont? Is there a unification? I mean, are they getting the same? Please tell the people about what you were telling me earlier in the program, earlier before we went on air, about what's been the response for the people of Vermont since Senate Bill 55 with your organization? Unbelievable.
People, for the first time, are thinking that Vermont can be changed. We are either one or two of the safest states in the Union. We've been that way pretty much forever.
Right. And if you took away Rutland, we would be number 1.
Actually, show you, last year, there were 7 deaths or 7 murders. And they keep talking about guns. Out of those 7 murders, 1 was by a firearm, 4 were by knife, and 2 were by choking. Mm-hmm. I see nobody calling to take away our knives, and I see nobody taking away our hands.
Well, I think it was the 2016, we read the FBI crime statistic report.
Sure.
And more people were killed with hammers and blunt instruments than with rifles.
Sure. Well, that's the same nationwide. You know, you see all these news things constantly going guns, 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 but the vast majority of murders in this country are bludgeoning or choking or things like that.
Right.
You also look at the World Report, and I think we're 124th. Some places that are more dangerous than the United States, as funny as it sounds, are islands off the Caribbean. People are getting killed more there than they are here per capita. Australia, as safe as everybody says they are, has one of the highest murder rates in the world.
Agreed. Everyone's disarmed.
Yeah.
Now, and also to add to these statistics, because we broke them down when we talked about the FBI crime statistics reports, if you took away the gang slayings, there is a big difference in the cultures in this country. And you know, we have the statistics that we talked about one time, and we had them on the charts about homicide and robbery and theft and larceny and prostitution, all these things. Well, the black race was just predominantly, on murder and killings and everything, way up above everybody else. And then it usually got down to Hispanics, Asians, and then whites nationally. This was the FBI's reports, not mine. And if you took away the inner city, like let's just say Baltimore, which I find very interesting, I brought up the other night, that Baltimore doesn't have the money to send their children, to bus their children to museums anymore. But they had the money to bus their children from Baltimore to Washington, D.C. for the March for Life rally. Well, that is nothing about indoctrinating the children. And that's what's going on with these school systems are not, I call them the public fool system.
Yep.
They are indoctrination centers. They are not education centers, no more. These kids can't count change, their communications. I don't know if you know, but the United States Army, I read this last month verbatim from the Army Times. The United States Army, when you graduate boot camp, and I think they were starting the end of this month, you are no longer going to have to pass a hand grenade throwing class or land navigation.
What?
Because they're finding that the kids aren't physical enough to throw hand grenades.
That's ridiculous.
And they can't manually do a compass on a map and, you know, and triangulate and all the basic things that we all learned.
Sure.
And Boy Scouts, by the way. So the U.S. Army is no longer doing this.
That's, you know what's going to happen?
I do.
All their electronics are going to go south.
Absolutely.
And these guys are not even going to know where they are.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. And you know, and we've covered this on the show, and I don't want to get the subject too much, but we've demonstrated it with the USS Donald Cook, all these ships and aircraft that have been taken over digitally. There was just another one last week that we read about, an F-18 Prowler, one of our biggest electronic birds. Everything went down except for the engines, communications, navigation, everything. Interestingly enough, I agree with you, and it's a danger. They think them satellites are going to be automatic and they're going to be correct. Well, you can ask Ron Brown, if you remember the Commerce Secretary of the Clinton administration, about how good, you know, how well they can affect GPS. You know,
I use GPS once in a while when I'm riding with my buddy Bob, and I don't want to think about how many times we get lost.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. So, but it says a lot about, you know. Yoyomoto, staying on the military topic, Yoyomoto, when the admiral who ran the Japanese fleets, and he was, you know, Pearl Harbor and other things, Midway and other battles, the hierarchy of the Japanese government was making a plan to invade the western, the Pacific coast of the United States. And their idea was that they could sustain enough that they could get the United States to sue for peace. That's one reason why they went into Pearl Harbor and so forth. But anyway, Yoyomoto said, this will never work because behind every blade of glass will be a rifle.
Yep. Civilian rifle.
Exactly. And we're winning the culture war, I think, with guns. The fastest growing segment in the gun industry right now, as far from, well, this was last year, was women. Yep. Participation. Well, if the women are going, the men are going. And if the men and the women are going, guess what? Now the kids are going, and that's a whole other generation.
Sure.
Where I think we're losing the battle is in the educating the people about who they are that wish to take our guns away and the mechanisms of government that are being used to manifest that. And I think we're seeing a good example of that, what's going on in Vermont right now.
Oh, absolutely. They're turning something that's a 227-year tradition into something that's evil.
And illegal. And illegal.
And illegal. Well, they're
going to make criminals out of all of us.
Sure. Well, that's because certain legislators at the State House don't trust the people of Vermont, which is insulting.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? And we don't trust them.
Hey, somebody wants to take my rights away. Am I supposed to trust them?
Right.
I go to the State House and I talk to certain people, and they lie through their teeth. I know they lie because they use all these excuses. And they've been bought and paid for by Michael Bloomberg and his Every Town for Gun Safety, Moms Demand Action /
And let's not forget George Soros, because his funding is a enclave of funding. Just not here in Vermont, but everywhere.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, Michael Bloomberg's organizations in the state of Vermont in the past 4 years have spent almost $2 million.
Think of that.
Yeah, it's, you know, my budget is maybe $100 a week.
Right. Right.
You know, and
you know, and you think about this. This is the money above the board.
Sure.
How much money is, because I know, listen, you know, you ever break down the word politician?
Yeah.
Poly in Latin means many of, like polypropylene, that type of thing. What's a tick? It's a blood-sucking organism. And that's all I think of most of them people up there. I think they're there for their own gain, they don't care about the Constitution, our rights. They don't care about anything. It's their gain. And I mean in any way, whether it's monetary, whether it's power, whether it's position, whether it's, you know, public acknowledgement, whatever. This is what they're after. And they're not answering to us. And when I say there are ones that are. There are ones that go there with the right ideas and the right motivations. But It's a dirty game, politics, isn't it?
Oh yeah, we've
I mean,
gotten to
you
the
see
point.
it more than me even.
We try to be nice. We try to educate legislators.
Yeah.
We've done that a couple times.
Yeah. See, Ed, not to cut you off, and please keep your thought, but
Sure.
you said educate. And I've said on this show a million times, education's our best ammo.
Absolutely. The education part of it, you know, it's hard to say something to make somebody understand it. We did a video which I actually showed in the the House Judiciary Committee, which got us another vote on our side.
Well done.
When Lalonde was talking about assault weapons, I showed him what an assault weapon really was through a video. And if anybody wants to see our YouTube channel, I hope it's still on there.
Yes, folks, while we're, Ed, please keep that thought again, but last night, folks, YouTube, and I read it verbatim from their public statement, YouTube is eliminating all gun-related videos on their YouTube channels. And this is their own statement. It was carried by multiple sites that I go to for reference. So anyway, please continue.
Yeah, so anyway, I took a standard Ruger 1022, okay, and I have it with 4 different stocks, okay. Now a standard 1022 by Lalonde's description would have been an assault rifle, even with the wood stock, because it has a pistol grip and a removable magazine. I took that and I put it into one with a full-length forend, just by dropping the action in the barrel in. Very pretty rifle.
Yeah, a 1022 is awesome rifle.
Yeah, and it was still an assault rifle, okay? And I took it and put it into another wooden stock, which didn't have the pistol grip, and in the video it's showing, now it's perfectly legal. And we're talking plain old wood stock 1022s.
Right.
And then I really opened up his eyes. I put it into a bullpup, one of the plastic bullpup conversions.
Yeah.
There's your assault weapon. This is what you're trying to ban. It's the same gun.
Right.
And that opened up his eyes, and he pretty much pulled that part of the bill.
Why don't you demonstrate to us?
Sure.
You brought in some things here. Why don't you show this high-capacity magazine that would be outlawed?
Well,
if you
yeah,
would.
that's part of, he kept that in the bill.
Yeah.
A high-capacity magazine is anything over 10 rounds. If it's removable, if it's tubular, with the exception of a 22 long rifle, okay? Now, here's the fun part. This is a barrel from an 1860 Henry carbine. The barrel itself takes 16 rounds. A gun like this, if it's a big pile of rust, is worth between $5,000 and $10,000. If it's a pristine one, something with history, it's worth over $100,000. The way this one works is you turn the barrel this way, you drop the bullets in, you turn it back in, and a spring comes forward and feeds it down through here. You can't modify this gun. 2 reasons: because of the way it's manufactured and because of its history. And they still make reproductions of these. The reason you can't do that is because the way it's assembled, you'd have to machine this all the way down to here and ruin the value just to make it a legal firearm.
And what year is this again?
1860 is when they first started manufacturing them. And there are a number of companies now that do make reproductions. Henry Arms right now does one. It's right around $3,000.
Which is just
and it'd be illegal to sell it in the state of Vermont because it's a high-capacity magazine.
Imagine that.
And it's 44 caliber instead of 22.
Yeah.
Okay. Another thing they're doing is a 10-round magazine. The magazine capacity for most semi-auto pistols these days is over 10 rounds. It could be 12 to, I think, 19. Magazines, the shooter in Florida was using 10-round mags. He did quick change, and the funny thing is, I don't care if it's a 10-round, 5-round, 30-round, all you got to do is change it out, do that. It doesn't take long. I'm not even speed loading this thing, I'm just putting it in and out. When those kids are hiding under those tables, when they're in a lockdown, it doesn't matter whether the guy uses a semi-auto, a bolt action, a lever action, and lever actions are almost as fast as semi-act. Watch Saturday morning, AMC, the rifleman. Watch how fast he shoots that lever-action rifle. People don't have time to go after somebody who's shooting at them because they're hiding under the thing. They don't know what's going on, and it's a terrible thing. We've long been advocating for having armed security, school personnel, teachers, janitors, I don't care. We have actually offered to the state so that it costs them not one dime. We will train the teachers with certified instructors, and one of our instructors actually is the guy that teaches airline pilots security.
Awesome.
Yeah, so
what has their response been, Ed?
They don't want to hear it. They keep saying, well, we can't have things like that because some kid's going to get shot, which is lies. Because what you do is you take the kids, you put them in lockdown, and the teachers that are armed and trained are out in the halls returning fire. Does it work? It just happened a couple of days ago in Maryland.
Sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
Rather than that, they'd rather have gun-free school zones. Those signs haven't stopped anybody.
No, and they're just defenseless zones.
Yeah,
they're not
that's it.
gun-free. They're defenseless zones.
Exactly.
The law is already on the book not to murder, not to go into schools and shoot.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I read one account from a local Florida newspaper that 34 laws were violated from the shooting down in Florida. 34. Sure. So why do we need more? Because they're not, listen, they don't care about the safety of the kids. That's not what it's about.
No, they're looking for an agenda.
Thank you. The kids are it's like, I don't know if you're familiar with the Hegelian dialectic, George Hegel. Sure. If you would, just picture a triangle with me, Ed.
Okay.
And Goebbels used this, Goebbels from Nazi, used this incredibly well. And this is what Rahm Emanuel was talking about, and this is what they do. They create a crisis. And then you've got to get the emotional response you want from the people. And then because of the emotional response that you created by the crisis, you bring in the solution. And the people will welcome the solution because of the fear or anger. You've got to have fear in this equation. If you can throw anger in there, even better. This is according to George Hegel. So you create a crisis, you get that emotional response of fear and anger, and then you bring in the solution without a shot being fired. The people will willingly give up their rights. They'll willingly go along with you. They'll even clap along with you while you're taking away their rights.
Sure.
And this is what they're doing. And Hegel said it very well that nothing will stir the emotions of the people than children being victims.
Sure.
And this is what they're doing.
Absolutely.
They don't care. We kill 9,000 kids a day with abortion. You know, you and I can't drive down the road without a seatbelt on because they're concerned about our safety, haha. But every school kid that goes to school in a school bus every day, there's no seatbelts for them.
I know. And they're going up the highway 50, 55,
right.
60 miles an hour.
Right, right.
You know.
So, this whole thing that it's for the kids, they know it's not for the kids. It is an agenda. And that's exactly what it is, Ed.
Oh.
And I see it every day. I see that Hegelian dialectic being used every single day. And I said it the other day that you always got to ask, qui bono is Latin, who's benefiting? Are the people of Vermont going to benefit from the actions of a crazy man and the inactions of the law enforcement that was taking place there, from the FBI to the local sheriffs, all of them? The entire government system failed. But there's going to be no repercussions on them people that failed. The repercussions are directed to you and I.
Of course, that's the way it works. From what I'm hearing, it's funny. We study these shootings, okay? In Portage, Kentucky, the thing that stopped that shooter was the vice principal who went to his car and got a firearm. A lot of people, they don't say this on the news, but if you read the police reports, which we do. The college, I forget the name of the college, was one of the first ones where they had the sniper sitting up on the tower there. It was a civilian.
In Texas? Charles Whitman in Texas back in the day?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
He actually was stopped again by a civilian who went up into that thing.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Yes. So Ed, you say we do a lot of studying on these shootings.
Sure.
Let's get into that a little bit. In other words, why is there a gun owners of Vermont. And what you say we are doing the study. I mean, you're not just collecting money. You're into this, you know, tooth grit and nails, as they say.
We have a research department run by my vice president, and there's a few people that do nothing but get on the computer, look up this stuff, find the police reports, do all that. If you go to our webpage, www.gunownersofvermont.org, go to the research and analysis page. We have thousands of pieces of information listed in different categories. We have videos, we have FBI crime reports, we even use the CDC crime reports, everything. Legislators, what they're doing. It's unbelievable what Bob and his crew does, and I'm a computer idiot, so I have problems finding this stuff.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, but Bob and his crew do an amazing job. They really do, and they like all of us are doing it no charge. You know.
Yeah.
We're a complete volunteer organization. We have a Facebook page that gets that information out instantly. You can't cover a lot on Facebook, but our website has so much in it that you can spend a week going through it and not even finish it up.
So, and I know how I feel about this question and for the answer, but is there a need for an organization like Gun Owners of Vermont?
Yeah, there's always been a need. I started the organization with 10 people sitting in my living room 21 years ago. And we started seeing things then, and it was kind of minor little things, and we were always able to defeat
But
it.
you saw enough red flags to take action.
Well, yeah, we've had anti-gunners, and we're sitting there saying, why are these doing this? You know, and back then they didn't really go anywhere because the rule in the State House was don't do guns.
Yeah, it wasn't touchable.
Right. At the same time, that's when Brady first came through. And we had a problem with it because they had, at the time, Vermont law enforcement doing the job by mandate of the feds. One of the Vermont sheriffs, Sam Frank, was one of the people that took that to court. And this is far-reaching. They won in the Supreme Court because this was the first time that it was done where it was an unfunded mandate. Now the feds, if they want a state to do something, they can't force Vermont or any other state law enforcement to do something because it was declared unconstitutional. So this had far-reaching effects.
Awesome. Well done.
Well,
well done.
You know, Sam's a good friend of mine. He's a great guy. Most of Vermont law enforcement are actually very close to us.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I will tell you that I did EMS in Providence, Rhode Island, and then I did EMS up in this section of the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. And, you know, I found, because you can't, and I try to tell you this a lot, you cannot just blanket any organization or any people.
Yep.
I don't care if it's education, economics, skin color, culture, job, I don't care. You can't blanket everybody into one category. But I find that law enforcement in Vermont, number one, are extremely patient from Providence, Rhode Island, and other cities that I did EMS. But also, I find that a lot of them really are there or enter for the right reasons.
Yep.
You know, you don't have this little man syndrome where I gotta get a badge and be a big guy now. I think a lot of them are there for the community. So I'm leading this into, what do you find law enforcement mindset with regards to private ownership of guns in Vermont?
Law enforcement in this state are extremely pro-gun. We actually, they sent us a letter that they sent to the State House. The Chittenden County Police Association did a thing with all law enforcement in the state, and they sent the state a letter saying they were absolutely opposed to any gun control.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, now if this all happens, and this is just a stepping stone, I understand that.
Yep.
They're going to create conflict between law-abiding citizens in the state of Vermont, and they're going to make the law enforcement do a task that they really don't want to do. And people are going to get hurt in so many ways on both sides.
Unfortunately, yes, but a lot of Vermont law enforcement are not going to enforce that law. Vermont law enforcement right now has discretion. They know who the bad guys are and they know who the good guys are. unfortunately, legislator keeps giving them all these mandates, and they don't like it any better than we do.
What do you think would happen if, like in Chicago, the mayor requested United Nations troops into Chicago? I don't know if you read that, but that's fact.
I read it, and
Yeah.
I can believe
Now,
it. They didn't come, but
yeah, right. Well, Trump made some phone calls on that. That ain't happening, and I'm glad. Now, if Hillary Clinton was in, I'm not sure things would have went that way.
no, it probably would have gone that way.
Exactly. So anyway, we got to be quick. We're running out of time. But what do you think their reaction would be at the leadership positions about blue helmets coming into Vermont to take guns?
I'm afraid of it. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. I know that's another part of the Vermont Constitution that says they can't.
Right.
The only part of the Constitution on that is Vermont law enforcement are the only ones that can enforce Vermont law. We've repeatedly told the feds they cannot come in and do stuff like that.
Right. Well,
they can do federal law. The UN, I'm really afraid of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we're here and one of the reasons I have this organization is to try to prevent stuff like these bills happening, to avoid stuff like that. I don't want to be in another war.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Ed, I want to read a quote from Ronald Reagan. And again, this is how he saw it, what was at stake. And then I would like to just continue a little bit about gun owners of Vermont. Obviously, it seems to me that you guys have a tremendous amount to offer on information.
Sure.
So, and this is what Ronald Reagan saw as what was at stake. He says, "You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children the last best hope on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness." That's what's at stake, Ed.
Yeah.
As you know.
I know.
As you know, that's what's at stake. For a person who's like, gee, wait a minute, I went through the public school system. I have been indoctrinated negatively on guns. And I hear about these shootings, and we never hear about the gun. This gun hasn't moved at all and turned on us, has it?
No.
No. But we never hear about people who use guns as a deterrent to crime, do we?
No, we don't, and it actually even happens up here. Burlington, when that guy was hacking it, guy hacked his wife to pieces with a machete, went after his mother-in-law. Two guys in the street, out front of this guy's house where he was doing it, stopped them with firearms. There are many instances where we know ladies who are members of the organization who have stopped their abusing boyfriends or husbands. The idea is Vermont is well armed, which is also a deterrent.
Absolutely.
We do statistics, crime analysis, and we compared at one time Brattleboro, Vermont with Greenfield, Mass. Same basic logistics, same kind of, okay? Greenfield had a violent crime rate 500 times higher than Brattleboro. We couldn't even really find anything for Brattleboro unless we went back 20 years, because there's so little of this thing happening up here. Again, 2009, there were 0 firearms deaths. And again, 75% of the population of this state has easy access to firearms.
Easy access, my friend.
Easy access.
If this bill passes, I got to lock all my guns up.
Yep.
So when someone comes into your house, they automatically have surprise on you. They have the advantage. There's no doubt about that, especially at nighttime, the average person's sleeping, okay? So I got to go to my safe, fumble with my key or do my digital thing, whatever it is. Get this gun out.
And then load it.
And then load it, and then train it on the perp.
Yep.
I've already lost the battle.
You got it. And the response time for the cops, if you call them, is 20 minutes.
To do their paperwork. So they're going to make us, just like the schools, defenseless zones. They're going to make every home in Vermont a defenseless zone. Why do these shooters not go into police stations or, say, the Hells Angels clubs?
Yeah.
Why don't they do that? Because you know what? They know it's not going to be free pickings.
That's it.
These people are cowards that do this.
Absolutely.
They're cowards. And they know. And the reason why people don't come into our houses, I'm speaking third person throughout Vermont, is because, like you just said, 75% of the people in this state have guns by their bedside if you do try to come into my place at night.
Yep.
And they're going to take that right away from us.
Yeah. It's funny, they did a poll and they said 40% or 42% of people in Vermont had firearms. Again, if some polling company called you up and said, do you have a gun in your house? Are you going to say yes or no?
I'm going to say hang up, have a good day.
You got it. So
Right.
these polls aren't really accurate.
Well, I will be honest with you. I live in a very rural area, even for Vermont. I live in Newark. We don't even have electricity. It comes down our road.
Okay.
But generally speaking, around everyone, all of my neighbors, and I don't have a lot of them, but the neighbors I do have, there's not one house that doesn't have multiple guns loaded all the time in case there is some kind of infraction.
Well, I've got 3 neighbors, and we all got guns, and we all actually shoot at my place whenever we feel like it.
There you go.
So.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Ed, we are running out of time, my friend.
Okay.
I want to thank you for coming on such a short notice. But if the people wish to find all this information and more information about your organization, and yet to get on that website and go over all this case study, I find
Sure.
that fascinating. How can they make contact?
Basically through the webpage, again, www.gunownersvermont.org.
And we'll put that up on the screen, folks, for everybody.
We also have an open Facebook page so that anybody can see it, because we have nothing to hide. That would just be Gun Owners Vermont, I think, at Facebook, I'm not sure. There's contact information on our website, my number, our emails, membership applications. You can even buy T-shirts if you want one.
And how many members continually now?
Well,
currently, I should say, sorry.
Without being 100% accurate, the last time I looked, we were at 5,500.
Nice.
And we're growing, because of what's going on at the station, at the State House, we're growing exponentially.
And what these politicians need to understand, Ed, is that the average Vermonter/American is waking up, and we're watching you now.
Sure.
Yeah, we were all asleep before. We were all entertained. We were all indoctrinated. But you know what? We're starting to regurgitate some of the stuff that's been forced down our throats, and we're watching.
Oh, yeah.
We're watching now. I mean, the turnout in Barrie the other night, I thought that was a strong turnout. What were your thoughts?
Actually, for Barrie, yeah, we had probably, around 100 people.
I got to think at least, yeah.
100, 120. So
Right.
Nobody took a head count.
Right.
But the funny thing is every time we go to a turnout, we were at the State House. The State House, we had, I think, somewhere around 1,200 people during that first big public hearing on the other bill. And they couldn't even, there was 40 speakers on each side set up. They couldn't even finish the antis they ran out of speakers before they ran out of time.
Yeah.
At Barrie, you were there, would they have 4 or 5 people as far as the anti-gunners?
Yeah.
You know, they keep saying they have all these huge numbers, and the funny thing is we keep showing up with 9, 10, 20
to 1.
to 1.
Right.
These are the people that are going to be going out and voting.
Absolutely.
And they're going to be voting out
right.
those people that are going against us.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, we've been doing this show for, 7 and 8 years, collectively. And before I was a nut wacko and all that. Now people are coming up asking questions.
Yeah.
There's been an awakening of the sleeping giant, as Yoyomoto said. But we have to continue that because, boy, they're not just knocking at the door, they're in the gate.
Oh, yeah.
They really are.
Well, this time they've gone too far. The State House right now, as far as gun control, is a feeding frenzy.
Right. And another thing that people don't understand is that we can have effect.
Oh, yeah.
We can have effect, because the last thing the powers to be want is for us to wake up, educate, and unify. Because we can have effect, and we are having effect to some degree, because otherwise this bill would be even worse. And the stepping stones would have been taking place years ago.
Yep. Well, they could still be worse because once it goes down to the floor,
you never know what they're
they
going to
can
add.
amend it.
Right, they can amend it with no public discussion, nothing.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Right. It's funny. It's like I say, people have woken up. After this, we're going to be doing a major get out the vote drive.
There you go.
So.
And folks, please go on the website, look for Gun Owners of Vermont, try some out of information. If you have any questions, I'm sure Ed and his good staff will answer all your questions for you. My friends, as always, we're very thankful you take the time from your busy day to watch our program. We always close in asking you to seek truth, obtain knowledge, manifest kindness to your fellow man. And we always close in reminding you that your government is your responsibility. We thank you for watching.
Can't believe we are all so blind. Can't believe we are all so blind. Well, the truth is very simple, very hard to find.